Hi, everyone. My name is Brandon Harrison. I'm Associate Features Programmer for Doc NYC. I'm very pleased to welcome Zeshawn Ali and Aman Ali from Two Gods. Hey, guys, how are you doing?
Hey,
Pretty
Brandon.
good.
Fine.
Thanks for having
Thanks
us.
for having us.
The film is amazingly beautiful. So, first and foremost, I wanted to ask your process and your strategy for shooting the film the way you did. How did that come about? Were there any inspirations, or how did that happen?
Well, thank you for the kind words about it. I think, this film we knew even from the very early on when we met our subjects, there was this kind of like beautiful sort of juxtaposition naturally happening in these spaces that we were in where, you're around these kind of like spiritual rituals of death and the kind of like navigating those spaces of grief and ritual and faith, but also in such close proximity to that there were these young men that were really like coming of age, and there's like kind of an inherent sense of like intimacy and vibrancy there. And what a lot of our shooting choices in terms of the black and white, the proximity to our subjects, the kind of like intimate style that we really wanted to like have be like a living, breathing part of the film was really this sort of like intentional way to kind of like encapsulate the emotions that were just naturally in the room when we were filming. And I think that was like an artistic choice, but it was also like a choice to make sure that everyone was kind of grounded in this sort of understanding of both spaces of the ritual and these coming of age spaces are beautiful and grand and intimate all at the same time. And I think the black and white and some of the kind of camera choices that we made in production were kind of to help highlight that and elevate that if we could.
Yeah, and to echo those stylistic choices, Newark, New Jersey is a community, for lack of a better phrase, just grossly misunderstood. Very often it's portrayed as a community with a lot of crime and murder and chaos and this and that. But for us, the way we approached this film was, well, there's a reason why people live here. There's a reason why people are proud to be from here, call this place home, and there's multiple generations of families that continue to celebrate and being proud of their community. And so with that lens, is how we wanted to show these people and show this community in a way that they see themselves.
Really well said. I just want to say I appreciate that as someone who was born there and whose family lived there for many, 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 many years. Thank you for that. Considering the community aspect of what you wanted to show about Newark, how did you guys initially, contact Hanif and then Nas for Quan? How did you meet your subjects? What was that initial contact like?
So our background, Zeshawn and I, we did a project called 30 Mosques in 30 Days, where we drove to every state in America to tell stories about the Muslim American communities. For us as Muslim Americans, we were just kind of just fed up with what we saw on TV and in film, just not mirroring just everyday life. And so that was always the lens that we were always trying to find stories was who are these interesting characters and individuals that need to tell their stories. And yeah, we heard about this casket shop in Newark, and from there, we met Rashad, the casket owner, who introduced us to a lot of people in the community. And we met Hanif. And then one day for Kwan, literally just stumbled into the shop and we're like, who's this kid? And light bulbs went off. And so it was through their lens that we started to film. And with filming, this is a film that was shot over the course of about 4 or 5 years. And we really were trying to be patient with this because we wanted to take our time and to build people's trust. And as you know better than I do, Newark is a community that, rightfully so, is very skeptical of how it's being portrayed in lots of pop culture and mainstream media. And so we wanted to let our subjects know that we care for them more than just a film. So there was days we were just hanging out for months on end before we ever picked up a camera and started pointing it at them. And so we wanted to make sure that we cared for people on a personal level and on a human level before we ever started filming.
Very well said. I was curious about how you navigated the plotting of the film, when you're working with your editing team and even when you're putting things together over a long period of time, 4 or 5 years. How do you navigate and switch between your subjects? What was that process like? Discuss that a bit.
I think, you know, the edit was such a kind of like, I think with any film that when you're dealing with multiple characters over a long period of time, you know, you're dealing with a delicate sort of like dance that you're doing in the edit in a lot of ways. But I think with this film in particular, the kind of like the tonal sort of like weaving together of characters as they come together and drift apart, but the beauty in those moments that are both together and apart, and like the kind of meaning that those have, was constantly like, how do we find ways to connect our characters, whether it be through the literal them being in the same space at the same time, or with like thematic sort of elements. So I think that's where we really played around with score, with the kind of like textural details of water and ritual and prayer, and all of these sort of ways to kind of like understand that no journey is the same. And the film kind of like really kind of highlights that. However, your journey is also a lot of times defined by the people that come into your life at a certain moment. And those are the people and those are the moments that you're going to carry with you. And I think that was kind of a theme we kept coming back to, is like, what is Furqan carrying with him when he goes to a new place? What is Hanif carrying, you know, about Furqan and Naz when he's in a moment where he's kind of encountering some struggles? And I think those sort of like grounding it in the sort of like intimate kind of character relationships was a way in which we found ourselves able to kind of like fluidly move through spaces in that way. So I do think that, you know, there was a lot of ways we played with time and tone, but really at the end of the day, it was always grounded in making sure that we felt connected to our subjects and connected to their journeys, kind of like every step of the way, even when they were kind of geographically or physically apart.
We have obviously the casket shop as the main locus of the film, but then everyone goes off and lives their individual lives and has these experiences that shape them. What were those shooting days like away from this central place? And what were those? How did your subjects feel about those days? You know, in their personal worlds.
Yeah, and that's. Oh, go ahead, Zeshawn.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say like that. That to me, I think is one of the most interesting parts about the filming process for this, was that, you know, the casket spaces and the washing rooms. It's like those are obviously like, not obviously, but those are. Very quickly in the film you realize that those are like spiritual sort of like places of like work and tradition and sort of ritual. But I think what we were really kind of impacted by in the filming process and when we were filming with our subjects is like holding all of those kind of intimate spaces with like an equal amount of like care and respect and like intentionality. So like when we are in you know, Naz's bedroom and Naz is really kind of like talking about you know, grief or, you know, pain of some sort that he's encountering in that moment in time, that's a spiritual space. It's just like his own personal kind of spiritual space, in the way that the casket shop is a place where Hanif kind of like finds a place to kind of define himself and connect with like what he's going through. So I think like how we defined and like allowed our subjects to lead us on their sort of journeys of like what spaces they found spiritual was a way in which we kind of balanced it, not only editorially, but also in terms of like our filming style. Like we treated every space with an equal amount of respect, even if it was like sitting in Furqan's favorite spot in the park and he's like eating a potato chip, you know, but like that's a spiritual place because that's where he kind of connects with some of like, starts to connect with some of the bigger themes of God and spirituality and like starting to connect the dots as you do when you're a kid that age. So I think that was one of my favorite parts about the filming process, and also editorially was like, how do we hold both of those spaces with equal sort of importance and like love?
Yeah, and just to add to that, and that's where, to what I was saying earlier, is why we try to spend as much time as possible with our subjects, because yes, you have an idea as filmmakers of where you hope the story to go, but life happens and all these turns, you know, can happen as they do in the film. Those aren't things that we could have anticipated, but that's where the benefit of spending time with your subjects are. And sometimes Hanif will say, hey, it's my sister's birthday. Let's go to her house for a birthday. We're going to go. We may not film. We're just there to hang out. And so it's about caring for your subjects more than the subjects as friends. And so those are the things that I think just patience and just spending as much time as possible really speaks to, you know, the film that, you know, we were able to put together.
Have your subjects and your friends seen the film? What do they think about it? Or
They've seen it. They've seen it, and that was very important for us, is to be very transparent with what we were doing, the direction of it, even showing them little snippets, as we were filming, and they really enjoy it. It's kind of got to their head a little bit. They feel like they're, movie stars now and this and that. But it was very important for us to have them see it, because it's them being vulnerable and putting their story out into the world for thousands, hopefully millions of people to see. And that's not something we took lightly. And so we wanted to make sure that not only did they see it, but they gave their blessing for it, because it's their story putting out. And so we want to make sure that, most importantly, that they see themselves in this narrative. They can watch and say, okay, that's my story, not some caricature or surface level portrayal of my story.
for me, these next two themes were the the heart of the film. And this is my last question. What would you say that your film had to say about both craftsmanship and mentorship? What do those two things mean in this film, and how do they interact?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great sort of point. I think like, and I think through the lens of, I think Hanif's work, for example, like he sees casket building as this sort of like kind of extension of like care. Like care is like so instrumental in like the way that he does the work that he does. So it's like the care and tenderness to which he builds a casket, and the care and tenderness to which he'll wash a body, and the kind of like craftsmanship behind both of those practices. But also like those become natural extensions of like when he's bringing these kids kind of under his wing, it's like those are, that is the way that he shows them like love and respect and kind of care. And I think those are the moments that I think the juxtaposition of craftsmanship and care, I think, was kind of like a constant. I mean, that's like one of the biggest things that Hanif holds closest to him. So I think in the ways in which we kind of depicted those scenes, some of the most, kind of important and pivotal scenes is like, the moment where Hanif is teaching for Kwan how to build a casket, or at the end of the film when he brings his son back, and they're like, he's teaching his son how to build a casket. Those hold so much, not only care, but it also holds like the real sort of like central heart of like what Hanif, the legacy that he wants to leave behind, which is, the respect for the, traditions that he's working in, but the respect for the people that he loves the most, which are like the, the kids that he is trying to be there for. And that includes his own son. So I think that was kind of like really like a big part of Hanif's, our conversations with Hanif too, is like, how do we show your work in a way that is like honest to the impact that you want to have on these, on the kids, and, and the legacy you want to leave behind. So I think that was a huge theme in the film, was like that kind of craft. And it was also how we shot it, the kind of like attention to detail, not just about like building a casket, but the way the hand moves along a casket, like really sort of delicately, the way that a hand kind of washes another hand during a washing, like all of those sort of details were kind of like a means to elevate that care and craft at the same time.
Yeah, and that care and craftsmanship also helps bring comfort to families that are grieving during very, very unimaginable, painful times, to show that your loved one is being taken care of in the right way, and the community is coming together to take care of them. Brings comfort, and quite frankly, it brought comfort to us. So our father passed away during the production of this film, and we had never really dealt with, any serious loss in our lives before that. But because we had filmed with Hanif so much and spent so much time, we knew exactly what to do when it came to washing our own father and burying him. And Zeshawn and I became the pillars in our family to say, okay, we need to do this, we need to take care of this, we need to do this, we need to do that. And so thanks to Hanif, we were able to do that in our own lives. And then mentorship, that's, in every community, there's a Hanif that sticks up for those kids, and that OG in the neighborhood that just looks out for you. And for us, it was important to highlight that and celebrate that. And a lot of people ask us, what are your subjects up to now? And it's amazing. And we saw a little bit in the film, but it's incredible to see the man that Furquan is growing into. And we couldn't be more prouder of him. He's 16 now, Zishan, or 17?
17.
He's 17, yeah. And all of those lessons that Hanif instilled in him, they're all starting to register now. You know, he used to be kind of a bratty, you know, like punk little kid, but now he's matured into a very responsible man that has plans for his future, has plans to be for college and taking care of his family and being a role model. So it's beautiful to see the work that Hanif does continues to have impact on so many kids like Raquan.
Amazingly and powerfully said. Thank you, Zeshawn, Aman. Awesome film, Two Gods. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much.